Hey, Sim here. In today's video, it's that time of the year where we start to think about the next version of Tableau. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing a preview of 2021.2. It's almost time for this release to drop. So what I'm going to be doing is going through the coming soon page, which generally tends to give a pretty good overview of what's actually going to get released. Sometimes these features sort of miss the target date, but generally speaking, this will be everything that's coming out in the next quarter of the release. The other thing to be aware of is the .2 release, the second release of the year, is typically the release that has some of the biggest number of features. And that's just been a trend over the last 2 years. It doesn't mean that that's always the case, but generally speaking, this is always a release that really sort of shows what Tableau's been working on in the previous year. So I'm really excited to see what's on this page. If you've seen this already, by all means, drop a comment below. Let me know what you're interested in, excited to see. If you're wondering where I am, I'm actually just on the Tableau homepage here. You can see the URL here at the top. They have a coming soon page that is generally updated right before the release. And that allows me to essentially just go through this in more detail. You can go here too. I'll put a link to this in the description below, so you can browse these in your own speed. I've also put timestamps across the bottom of the video so you can see which sections you may be interested in and jump directly to that. But otherwise, this might be a bit of a long video, so let's get stuck in. Okay, so the first thing that I realized is there's actually a new notice. And this is actually, I think, a side effect of what's been happening recently with Tableau Online. Essentially what happens with Tableau Online is that's the infrastructure that's managed by Tableau. I actually did a talk for VizConnect about this particular Tableau Online instance that's set up across the world. Depending on which hub you are, they all get updated in advance of the release, and it's for a simple reason. Imagine Tableau releases the desktop version of Tableau or Tableau Prep, and you go to use it and you go to upload something to your server, but your server hasn't been updated yet. That would cause a little bit of a sort of an issue. And bearing in mind Tableau have millions of people using the Tableau Online instance, they probably have to start doing these updates probably a month or two in advance of the actual release in order to catch up and do all the testing they need to do on all the instances across the world and make sure that it's a seamless transition, because these upgrades are done hot, so they don't take the server down. There's very minimal, if any, sort of impact on users as well. So it's just something to be aware of. The reason the Tableau Online release tends to come sooner than most people expect is because they just have to do it. That's just how you have to run infrastructure and software side by side. So that's something to be aware of. That's a sort of a really nice thing to see here. I think the reason it's here is because a lot of customers realized they were seeing features that hadn't been announced anywhere. And so this notice is just there to let them know, hey, this sometimes happens. Okay, so let's start off with the features. Let's go to this one. Now, an interesting trend with this release is that actually viewers are getting some love. I've always said in various forums that the viewer license is sort of a difficult license to understand, because the majority of Tableau has actually been built around the creator, and therefore the viewer and explorer in some regards don't get like a first-class citizen experience. And I don't mean that as criticism of, you know, the direction of where Tableau is going. It's just simply since the subscription model came into being, it's been very easy to separate out what creators get, what explorers get, and what viewers get. And just to give you a context of that, if I just go to the Tableau pricing page, this is the page I always go to when I'm sort of explaining this to people. Just go to the pricing page. They have a really nice matrix that they do themselves. And essentially, if you think about the way that licensing is done in general, the majority of your users who end up being on a license are actually viewers. And so if you go down to this little sort of cost explorer, you can see the cost of each license. But the more interesting thing is if you keep scrolling down and you go to the viewer, you actually get this matrix of what each person's get. Now, the thing to bear in mind is that on professional servers or on, you know, instances across organizations, the majority of people are actually in this explorer and viewer column. But historically, if you go back to the core model of pricing and the way Tableau has been built as a product, it's actually been built around the creator. If you think about all the features in server, all the governance capabilities, they're built around enabling the creator to share content to people. So it's really important to see the shift, because the majority of users who experience Tableau might never ever build anything in Tableau. And so we really need to start to cater to those users, because that's in a way, that's where analytics is going. There's this recognition that, you know, people need to be empowered to look at analytics themselves without having to need people building dashboards or, you know, huge teams of people building lots and lots of assets that, largely never get used properly. So if you see this matrix, if I just go back to the point I was making, my point I've always made is, listen, a viewer basically gets the same sort of features as a generic CMS system. They can access, they can interact, and they can collaborate to a very sort of small extent. But then if you actually see this list of features, most of these other features are catered towards the creator. You can just see there's a tick box here for creators. The explorers do have a bit more functionality. They do have a bit more capability, but in essence, it's really a creator-led experience. The whole product has been historically designed around the creator. If you don't agree with that or you disagree with that, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. It's just a perception that I've made. And so going back to this, it's actually really good to see the addition of ask data and explain data to viewers. These are things that were only really possible before, I think, to some explorers, and going forward, they're going to be enabled for everyone. Okay, so ask data and explain data for viewers. Essentially, this is the feature. Ask data is the feature where you can go in and type a question and just, Tableau will come back with a response. It kind of tries to parse out what you've typed into a sentence that can be processed through SQL, and that returns a visualization or a chart inside of Tableau. No need to build a chart. You can then take that chart that it's built for you and then do it somewhere else. You can sort of see this on screen here in this little GIF that Tableau have created. You can type in a very simple question and boom, it will build a chart, and then you can use that analysis. So having this for viewers is really good because it's going to allow people to start actually exploring the server and exploring data on the server. So I think this is a nice addition. Explain data for viewers is also really important. Explain data gets a lot of love in this release for a couple of reasons. The first main reason is, of course, viewers can now use this. This was actually a feature that was typically enabled for the creator. When they right-clicked a data point, they could then get some additional context about what was happening at that data point. And it does some, statistical analysis of the data set and the fields behind that data set to try and understand what statistical significance that data point might have to the particular analysis that you're doing. Now, generally speaking, that it's not heavily used by creators, but I could also argue that that's not really the audience that's going to be using it a lot, because creators tend to often know a bit about their data sources, and when they're exploring the data, it happens very, very quickly. You don't think to sort of right click a data point and go to it. However, on the other hand, viewers are always curious to understand why certain behaviors are happening behind certain data points. And that typically is a question that goes back to the creator and say, hey, what's happening behind this data point? And so enabling people to actually do this themselves is actually quite nice. I'll be interested to see how this is implemented. Of course, this isn't live yet. It is live if you're using Tableau Online and you've got access to an instance with it enabled. But I always like to reserve judgment until it's actually released before I go in and start playing with the features. So that's just something really good that I think viewers are going to be getting. It's important to see Tableau adding capability for viewers. If I go to the next feature here, collections. Now, collections have actually been in a open beta sort of trial for the last month or two, and they've actually taken on a lot of feedback about how these collections are managed, and they've changed that functionality set for the better. So these have actually been available. If you've used these already, this is sort of not really going to change radically. The key thing to note here is you can essentially collect assets across different projects and put them in one place. Now, that doesn't override the system that you have for security and governance. The best way to think of collections are tags, but on steroids. I think that's exactly what a Tableau developer said. It's a more useful way of using tags, except for it's its own asset, its own item. So tags essentially allow you to go to some content and type in like a hashtag or something, and it groups that content that way. This is slightly more advanced because what it actually does is it allows you to add content into something that looks like a project but isn't as restricted as a project. And so it's just going to be a nice way to put everything in one place. Now, if you fast forward, this very much feels to me like a version 1. At conference, we actually saw some enhanced versions of what this might look like in the future. And so I'm really excited to see where this goes. As always with Tableau, especially with brand new things, the first release is never the final iterations. There's normally 3 or 4 or 5 more releases worth of work. If you think of the data model, if you think of ask data, if you think of explain data, these things have been getting incremental features consistently for multiple releases. So it's very much version 1. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm also excited to see what feedback they get to sort of see where this ends up. So that's going to be really cool. Let's head on over to the next row, which is the connected desktop for web authoring. So the browser is a big deal for Tableau. They're moving a lot of their capabilities to the browser. However, there are still some people who need to be able to go back to desktop. So this is a nice feature because what it does is it connects the web experience with the desktop experience. Let's say you're building something in the web and you're not really sure how to do something, or you get stuck and you really need the power features of desktop. This allows you to very quickly open up a workbook right from the browser, which is sort of interesting. So I'm going to be curious to see how that works. This feels like, to me, a way of essentially creating a download button that then triggers Tableau to open in another way. So that's going to be super interesting. I want to see how that works. I hope it's not just a download button that, literally just downloads the workbook and then you have to sort of follow through. So I'm excited to see how they've done that. It is possible for some browsers to basically communicate with software in your machine, but that might be an interesting sort of transition, especially in organizations when something's jumping from the browser to your machine. That's going to be interesting. So I'm really keen to see how that works, the mechanics of that, how that works, and really see if that's possible, elsewhere, especially in organizations that, really deep on security and, restrict basically everything that goes through the internet, Wi-Fi or Ethernet port. Okay. The next one is Jumpstart for Salesforce connection. So this one's an interesting one. I always thought we already had some Jumpstart workbooks for Salesforce, but what I think this is you can now log into your Tableau Online account using Salesforce login credentials. A newly enabled integration tab makes it simple to tap into and analyze your Sales Cloud and Service Cloud, all via a ready-to-go workbook that keeps your data fresh. So what this looks like is they've taken elements of what you could already do. So you can already do a single sign-on with Salesforce. It's possible to essentially make your Salesforce credentials log into Tableau. And then what they've also done is they've taken the Jumpstart workbook and sort of packaged these two features into sort of a nice little tool. So the main reason here is, Salesforce owns Tableau. Tableau is now a product. It's not a company. So you'd expect Tableau to be building on the Salesforce capabilities. The famous Salesforce 360, the customer 360. That's going to be really important for Salesforce going forward. Tableau is a big acquisition, so you really expect Tableau to be adding Salesforce features pretty much every release going forward, making it the go-to platform for doing analytics for Salesforce. Okay, the next one is the native Datorama connector. Now, this is an interesting one because I think it was 2 releases ago, there was a Datorama connector for Tableau, but it wasn't native. You had to go through this sort of weird process of downloading a file, putting it in the right folder, closing Tableau, opening Tableau again, and then you had this connected through this sort of weird backdoor that Tableau enabled through a feature. Now, the cool thing here is that now this is just native, and I've actually been excited for the Datorama connector because I've always seen it as like a gateway to other data sources. So going to be interested to see if this makes it a lot easier. I'm personally not too familiar with Datorama myself. I've never really used it, so this is maybe something I'll have to get sort of familiar with for the release ahead. So I'm going to be interested to see how much easier it is for that native connector to work. I assume it just works like every other connector. For example, for a Microsoft SQL Server, you just have the connector there, you plug in your details, and boom, you're ready to go. No sort of funny business required. And I also assume this will work with online and through the web browser as well, because most new features are also working in the browser. So I think that's going to be a nice sort of feature to add. The area spatial calculations. And this is really cool. I really like this. This is just, the Tableau mapping team continuously deliver. If there's one part of Tableau that is just pumping out features, it's the mapping team. Every single release, there's just something useful when it comes to mapping and spatial analysis. And this is always something that, people find amazing about Tableau. You double click a data point that Tableau understands as geography, and boom, it opens it up. And here what they've done is they've actually allowed you to do an area calculation, which is quite a simple thing, but being able to do it in the product means you can use this to do area calculations for reasonably, I'm going to say, small geographies. Now, the issue here is that, of course, if you're a bit of a nerd, you'll understand that the world isn't flat. If you don't think that the world is round, this is probably not the video for you. So yeah, there's plenty of places on YouTube for flat earth theories. Go find them. But if you do believe the world is round, then essentially when you try and calculate the area, you're essentially taking a circle and you're warping it flat to calculate the area in terms of an image, right? So it's actually really hard to do the maths correctly for calculating the area of a curved surface. You've got to know a bit more than just a simple sort of formula that you use for area calculations. So there's actually some really good research paper. I'll put it up on screen and I'll link it as well, where Tableau talk about this. And in various places, if you've ever dragged the distance between one point to another point, you'll see that after a certain sort of range, it starts to give you an estimate. And what I actually did do is I asked the developers when they were building this feature, hey, is this actually going to be accurate for really large geographies? And essentially the answer was, look, on smaller geographies, for example, the area in, when you're calculating the area of something like Central Park in New York, this is going to be pretty much on point. Okay, it's still an estimate, but it will still give you a good idea of the actual area, because the complicated math of getting it to do that sort of, again, this warping correctly and then calculate the area is just not there in this current version. But you shouldn't be using this to calculate the area of, let's say, a country, because if you take a simple continent, let's go to continent level, take Africa. Now, Africa looks flat on the map. It actually looks smaller than it should actually look. Again, I'll put another image of how Africa would look like if the area was actually represented properly in the typical map projection. It's not. So the area, when you're working over such a large area, has a large level of inaccuracy. So you shouldn't really be using it for anything large. So that's just a small sort of nerdy detail about this feature that I found out through the testing process. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. But pretty much everything small, if you just find the area of a park or something, or you want to know the area of a building and all the different plots, you can do all of that very nicely in Tableau and just figure it out. The area of an airport, that's another good example. Maybe airports have this particular sort of shape, or maybe you're creating new buildings and you want to figure out how much plots of land you've got in different areas. You can do that quite easily in Tableau, along with all the other spatial features that you're able to use already. So that's kind of cool. Now, map layers. I'm a bit of a map layers purist. I only use map layers for maps, but many people use map layers for other things. I won't be talking about that in this video, but what is nice here is you can now get a little bit of control for each of the layers. Now, I've seen this work, but in all honesty, I think I'm going to have to try this again, because this is one of those things where you don't really appreciate what it can do until you've tried it. But in essence, we are able to sort of get more control about how the layers work. That's the simplest ways of putting it. But again, I think this could open up some use cases that were possible before, but just the experience wasn't quite right. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this works. Right, Tableau Server in a container. Now this is for all the server nerds and all the infrastructure nerds out there. I'll take a brief detour. Long story short, a while ago, a lot of software professionals and infrastructure professionals sort of became really fond of something called a container. Now, the best way to think of a container is a box. Imagine I take Tableau and I put it in a box, but then I have another box which maybe has, let's say, dare I say it, Power BI. And then there's another box that runs something like Microsoft SQL Server. Now, the benefit of putting these things in separate boxes is they can't talk to each other. They're completely separate systems. But then imagine that I take all three of those boxes and I put them in another box. Okay. Now, those boxes are all inside of the same box, but they have no idea that each of them exists. And so this concept is essentially how servers work in the cloud. Essentially, there's one big server and you create something called a container, and in each container, you put a particular service. So in one box, I might put Tableau Server, in another one, I might put Microsoft SQL Server, and in another one, I might put Power BI or whatever you want to use. And then the great thing is, as far as those three pieces of software are concerned, they're not running on the same instance as each other. They all look like they're all running on the same software. Now, the real power here is, let's say if they all need to run on Windows, I don't need to install Windows 3 times, one in each box. I can put windows in the bigger box, the box that's containing all these things, and they'll all just use that one instance of Windows. And so that's a very simplified way of explaining containers. But what it means is that if you're an infrastructure or a server guy or whatever, this is going to make it much easier for you to run lots of services. So being able to put Tableau in a container means you can get this into probably your existing container setup and wherever you run that. So that's the simplest way to sort of look at this. Tableau marketing always try and simplify this, but I thought I'd just give an alternative analogy to sort of allow people to understand what's going on. The big thing here is, again, it's to do with availability consistently and handling, handling costs, because if everything's running on one place, you don't have to buy, 10 licenses of Windows to put one on each container and so on and so forth. They're just small details probably that I don't fully understand here. That does make it slightly easier for people who manage infrastructure to manage infrastructure. So that's going to be something cool to see. You might see organizations moving to different versions of Tableau, for example Tableau Server on Linux, because many of the other services or container services run on Linux as well. So that might be a nice sort of thing to add. But essentially, this is just a big push to make Tableau more cloud friendly. All right, let's go to the next one. Write to Google BigQuery. Okay, this is an interesting one. I actually don't understand too much about the Google BigQuery connection. I have used it once to analyze some airline data that was being loaded by Google dynamically to show off Google BigQuery. But beyond that, I haven't really sort of used it before. The nice thing here is that in Tableau Prep, it's now added as a data source. So you can write to Google BigQuery from Tableau Prep, which is nice to see. Essentially, think of it as one additional connector that you can write to in Tableau Prep. If I go to the next one, Tableau ID and multi-factor authentication. Now, this is interesting. We're excited to provide Tableau ID and multi-factor authentication to our Tableau Online customers, which provides them with the ability to enable multi-factor authentication on their sites. MFA is one of the easiest, most effective tools for enhancing login security and safeguarding your business data against security threats. So I think what this essentially means is that Tableau are adding the ability to add two-factor authentication to Tableau Online. And the way it's going to do this is going to send a verification code to the email that you're using for Tableau Online. So this is important, especially in organizations that have high security standards. Two-factor is almost a necessity. And if you think about it, analytics lives on Tableau Online. And so it's actually a pretty common attack vector, especially when it comes to social engineering, where someone will sort of try and get you to enter your password in another site. This protects that because two-factor will also then require a code to be sent to your email address, which you then have to go and get and type in. I also hope they add authentication devices. For example, some people use two-factor through Google Authenticator, or some of you might be familiar with Authy. This is an authentication app. That's a really nice sort of app to use. I prefer it over everything else. So I hope they add support for that, because the thing I find annoying about these email apps is when everything's sending a text or an email, you end up sort of optimizing the process for getting that code, which then actually makes it very easy for someone else to figure out, well, if you're going to have a two-factor authentication code, it's probably going to be texted to you. And if you text or email, where's the one place that you can find all that information? Your phone. And so it makes your phone the next attack vector. So if someone's really persistent and trying to break into something, they could probably figure out how to get into your phone. And again, most people's phone security isn't necessarily going to be as strong as this. So I always wish there was sort of some more intelligent, two-factor authentication. In essence, there's actually a general move to move away from passwords, broadly speaking, in the IT industry. So maybe I'll put a link to that sort of topic below. But check that out. This is going to be a nice quality of life improvement for Tableau Online. Let's go on to the next one. New data sources for admin insights. So this is an interesting one. Admin insights, I believe, is something that's actually enabled on Tableau Online. And what this is essentially two data sources that you get. You get TS events and TS users. Essentially, TS events and users lets you track what's going on. Now, one of the biggest, problems with this is that if you're a Tableau Server user, you have access to the whole entire Postgres database, everything that's available. And here on Tableau Online, you don't get any of that. So it looks like they're adding data about groups and site content. So you can actually start to look and see what's going on in there. But again, we'll have to sort of dip into that once that's available and really find out what's actually in that data and what can you now do with it that you couldn't do. It's going to be miles behind what you can do with Tableau Server. I'll be upfront with you here. It's just really important to bear that in mind. It's not quite the same access to the Postgres database as you get with Tableau Server. All right, web authoring improvements. So this is again part of the big push to make everything better for the web. So web authoring improvements, expanded formatting options, more formatting, parameter and set actions, and expanded filter options. So let's dig into this a little bit. Further customize your dashboards with the ability to format worksheets, backgrounds, titles, and captions on the web. That's a nice quality of life improvement. One less reason to switch over to desktop. But if you need to, don't forget, there's that feature up at the top that lets you very quickly open up desktop. Parameter and set actions. You can now create parameter actions and set actions within web authoring. So this is cool. Now, I think they've actually done this using an extension. If you look at Tableau Public actually has extensions called parameter and set actions. I covered this in my video about Tableau Public web authoring and the sort of extensions that are available there. I'll actually do a separate video on sort of some of the nice extensions that I've come across. Expanded filter groups. You can now define and edit top N and condition for discrete filters, unlocking more advanced filtering. So again, they're just taking off boxes here. They are making web authoring really have true parity, especially for the power features that a lot of people have. Today, you know, when you're doing web edit, you really have to trust that everything's available. And in some cases, it's just done slightly differently. It's not done exactly the same way. So it's going to be interesting to see how this is actually rolled out. All right, multiple analytics extensions per site. So this is nice. So previously what happened is you actually got the ability to add a different analytics extension for each site. But what this is saying is that each site can now have multiple analytics extensions. This means you can run 2 instances of Python, 3 instances of R, and you can even add Einstein Discovery because that's of course a Salesforce thing that's going to be in there. So this is nice to have. For example, if the finance team runs our server, but they run a specific version with their own specific code, you can add it into the site and run that next to the data science team who has a Python server or whatever, or another R server in a different version. It's all going to be possible. So I need to brush up because I haven't done Python or R in ages, and so testing this is going to be good fun. So I think I need to start creating some sort of instances that this can be tested with. Next one, data freshness improvements. Use the Hyper API and REST API to improve the data freshness. Interesting. So build solutions that connect Tableau more efficiently with a variety of data freshness technologies and use it for operational monitoring and analytics scenarios. You can now push updates to extract files through the REST API or Hyper API on Tableau Server Online to enable more flexibility, efficiency, and ultimately improve the freshness of your data. So let me try and explain this in English. What it's basically saying is I think they've allowed Tableau, or they've allowed an API to basically tell Tableau when to refresh something, or it's allowing Tableau to basically accept updated data. Now, I'm not sure which one of those, or if it's both, because a Hyper API is essentially a way for creating hyper files and loading that hyper file into Tableau, and the REST API is a way of controlling Tableau Server. So for me, I think the REST API here is going to be what's going to trigger a refresh, and I think the Hyper API is going to be what allows you to basically send data to an extract and then have it added to an extract. So this is going to be interesting to see, but I think the key thing here is actually you can now push updates. So this means you don't have to have a server running with extracts on a schedule hoping to catch the latest data. You can essentially refresh the data as soon as you know it's fresh. So you can run your ETL process. When it's done, essentially, boom, you push an update to the data sources and it's up to date at that time. That also means that the update date that people see is actually accurate because that's actually when the process run, not just when the extract run, which is sometimes sort of a confusing thing. People think the extract ran and therefore the data is fresh. Well, no, that doesn't mean the data is fresh. That just means it took a snapshot at that time. So it's a really important distinction to be aware of with Tableau. Okay. Next up, support for OAuth and OpenID Connect in the Connector SDK. So I literally don't know what that means. Sometimes this happens. I come across something and I just have no clue how to translate it. Extend the native OAuth service and Connector SDK to consume customer provided OAuth configurations. I have nothing on this. I'm really hoping someone at Tableau, or if you know what this means in the comments, please be the one to educate me, because I just don't know what's going on here. My hunch here is, I can sort of try and give an educated guess and see if it's close. OAuth is an authentication protocol in one way. OpenID Connect, I think OpenID is another way of authenticating. What I don't understand is extend the native OAuth service and connect SDK to customer provided OAuth configurations. I just don't know what this means. I think it means you can build your own authentication processes around this connector SDK. So basically, when you go and build a native connector for Tableau through this SDK, you can bring in your authentication mechanisms into that SDK, essentially meaning the person doesn't have to log in. I think that's what it means. If that's right, then let me know. If not, please correct me in the comments below. I love humbling moments like that, where you just realize you don't know everything about Tableau. You got to go out and learn more. So this is what happens. Writable field descriptions. Oh, this is nice. This is very nice. So edit field descriptions from lineage pages. Okay, so this is in the data catalog. Again, this is an add-on for Tableau Server or Tableau Online. Similar to how you can update table column descriptions, you can now update published data source field descriptions instead of having to republish the data source every time. Simply click on the field name and edit button to add, change, or remove the description. Cool. I think I'll have to see that when we see it. There's a nice screenshot here that shows what that is, so that's going to be nice to see. Bulk scoring in prep, web authoring, and prep conductor. This is interesting. So what is bulk scoring? Write MR predictions scores from Einstein Discovery. Okay, this is an Einstein Discovery feature. I kind of wish they led with that. Einstein Discovery bulk scoring would have been, I think, a nicer title. Directly into your data sets in Tableau Prep, Web Authoring, and Tableau Prep Conductor. So this essentially means you can't really use this unless, well, this is just for Salesforce data. You can't use Einstein Discovery or non-Salesforce data. And so, yeah, it's as simple as that. Once you've got your Einstein model running, the scoring is essentially going to be running on that data, and therefore this prediction is now available in Prep and Prep Conductor as well, which is kind of cool. Prep Conductor just allows you to schedule a Tableau prep flow, so Prep Conductor being able to do it is just as important as you being able to do it yourself. Now, the interesting thing here is it says bulk scoring in Prep Web Authoring, but it doesn't say Prep Desktop. So that's a small detail there that nearly got me. Bulk scoring in Prep Web Authoring and Prep Conductor. Maybe it's already in Prep Desktop, but that doesn't. I have to find out more about that. That's an interesting one. I'll come back to that one once it's released. But yeah, essentially, I know what the feature is, but I'm just wondering why not Prep Desktop. I'm trying to think if there's a reason in my head. It's not coming to me, so we'll have to sort of check it out as and when that's ready to go. Okay, bulk rename in Prep. Oh my lord. Wow. This, oh god. I can't tell you how many times I've renamed fields in Prep manually. Like, let's get into this a little bit more. Okay, so Salesforce acquires Tableau. Everyone suddenly thinks, yes, Salesforce data in Tableau is going to be so much better. No. Have you ever connected to Salesforce data source? Have you ever understood how many columns exist in a Salesforce data source? By the way, pointless columns, a lot of them. And yeah, when you need to use them, you need to literally sit there and spend time going through each and every one of them. Now, where this bulk rename really comes into effect, especially with Salesforce, is when you connect to tables that have the same field, okay? And this is sort of not an obvious problem once you sort of think about it, but when you dig into some of the structures that Salesforce has around objects and fields, you start to understand that some things are reused time and time and time again. And the typical thing you do in analytics is you bring all these things together. So an example is you might have a set of tables that matches activities in different stages. And for each stage, you have the same set of column names, because each stage is like a process, and it goes through a bunch of things, and then it goes to the next stage, and then it goes through another bunch of things. But the column structure, the field names, might actually all be the same. But if you're bringing these things through, you might have three separate tables: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So what do? Well, you want to put a prefix to each of those tables and the fields in those tables to say, hey, this came from stage 1, this came from stage 2. And you couldn't do that. And so here we are. Man, this to me, why is this at the bottom of the page? This is the headline feature of 2021.2. Honestly, this is the biggest feature of 2021.2. So yeah, I'm just so happy about this. I haven't even read the description, and I'm happy just to hear the sound of it coming. Even if it doesn't come, I know that it's being worked on. It's just so good. Oh my gosh. I'll stop being emotional. Okay, with bulk rename, you can now rename multiple fields at one time in Prep Builder and Prep Web Authoring, rather than individually changing each field name. You see, you can now add, remove, rename a prefix at the start of a field name, and add, remove, rename a suffix at the end of a field name, as well as do pattern matching for find and replace within a field name. What is this? Oh my god, where's this been? Where has this been all my life? Honestly, whoever's built this at Tableau, thank you. Because I know you've been hearing the complaints endlessly. I know you've been getting emails going, why isn't this possible? I know there's tons of Tableau forum posts saying, why isn't this possible? But hey, it's finally here. I just hope it works exactly as advertised and isn't buggy. That's just my only kicker there. So thank you whoever's built this at Tableau. You're all amazing, you know that. I'm just so happy to see this one feature. This is huge. Right, next one, SAP HANA performance improvements. Default HANA bind variables support is now enabled by default. Okay. Bind variables allow HANA to route correctly in a multi-node HANA environment, okay, and allow for plan cache reuse for HANA environment. It's a lot of HANA environment in this sentence. In addition, maximize Tableau's use of HANA's bind variable capability when connecting via JDBC. So again, I have no clue what this means. So if you are SAP HANA experts and you know what this means, please let me know in the comments below. All right. We're nearly there. Tableau Mobile for Intune Android. Okay, so let's look at this. Tableau Mobile for Intune is a new app that provides a quick and secure way to view, analyze, and leverage the data in your organization. The new app includes a newer design that is faster and more intuitive, an improved search and browsing experience consistent with Tableau Server and Tableau Online, and enhanced offline capabilities that are quick to load and offer richness and interactivity for visualizations. So what is this? What is Intune? Let me Google this. So Intune Android. Let's see. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Let's try again. Intune Android. Interesting. Set up Intune enrollment. Okay, so I think it's maybe like an MDM, mobile device management is what that stands for. Yeah, I think it might be like an MDM service. So Tableau Mobile for Intune on Android means for Intune is a new app that provides a quick and secure way to visualize and analyze. I think that's what it is. I think it's an MDM sort of layer or something. But to be honest, again, I don't know what this is. So we'll have to find out once the documentation is out. Last one, Amazon SageMaker for Tableau Quick Start. So when it says Quick Start, this is normally an AWS terminology. So Amazon SageMaker is a service by Amazon, and essentially this is for Tableau. So I bet if we click on this, we'll go to the SageMaker page. Yes, that's right. And it's actually being supported by Interworks, which is a Tableau partner, but they're also an AWS partner, and Tableau is also an AWS partner. It's a weird world of partners, but essentially they've got this quick start guide that shows you how to basically use Amazon SageMaker alongside your Tableau instance. So there's actually this nice diagram here. So if we click on this diagram, you can see this is your Tableau environment, and essentially this quick start creates like a place in the AWS cloud that allows your Tableau environment to basically leverage machine learning capabilities through the cloud. And it's sort of you can see SageMaker here on the right, and then you've got a whole bunch of things that are in here. And I think this is where probably Interworks or Tableau have worked together to sort of build this middle bit, because without this middle bit you can't really get to SageMaker. Amazon provides SageMaker, they provide a whole bunch of different services as standalone, but you've got to be able to port data into them, and so that's exactly I think what this is allowing for, which is pretty cool. So if we go back, you've got this quick start guide. Essentially what happens with these quick starts, if you click on the view deployment guide, it walks through essentially what you need to do. And this was written in February 2021 by Holt Calder at Interworks, and I can't say this, Shivansh Singh and Tony Building, AWS Quick Start team. And I think Tableau maybe been involved somewhere in there. So mainly an Interworks and AWS thing. But yeah, this is pretty much the guide of how to set it up. I don't know too much about SageMaker. All I know is it's used for machine learning in AWS Cloud. We can actually just Google it, make sure we know this, SageMaker AWS. Let's find out very quickly. Let's get the one-line summary from Amazon. What do they say it is? Machine learning for every data scientist and developer. Cool. There you go. Done. You now have machine learning and data science for every developer through Tableau. But there you go. I think that's pretty much every feature. If I just go back a few pages here, we'll actually get back to the coming soon page. I think I completely lost myself. I think maybe it's here. No, let's just do this. Let's just type coming soon. I think it will come up. Coming to America too. God, who's seen that? So here we are. Amazon SageMaker was the last thing on this page, and so we're pretty much done with that. A whole nice sort of world of features. How do I feel about the release generally? I think I feel pretty good. I think this is nice. The previous release was a bit Salesforce heavy, and if it's Salesforce heavy, it means it doesn't have as much application if you don't use Salesforce every day. But then again, Tableau is obviously a Salesforce product now, so we've got to come to expect that. I like the spatial improvements. Area and spatial are pretty cool. I love this. Literally, it's a small quality of life improvements that you know are going to save you 15 minutes when you try and use them again in the future, that you celebrate the most, right? Just things that make you happy. That is what bulk rename is going to do for me in this particular release. I like to see all the other improvements. These were all sort of nudges in the right direction. That's just sort of another thing sort of generally I'm realizing, it's really hard for Tableau to bring out big hitters now, because they've got a lot of users on their platform who are going to be unhappy if you radically change things. So a lot of the improvements are sort of small nudges. There's still plenty of places where there's big improvements still to be had, and I think those just take time, so we shouldn't expect to see that every release. And of course, this is probably the release that they were working on during COVID. So I'm actually quite impressed that this has managed to sort of come out in this period. If you think about software in general, it takes probably 6 to 12 months to develop it, and you have to go through probably a year's worth of research and understanding and user sort of context in order to prepare the features before they end up on the developer's table, because you don't want a developer to start building something that's not been thought through. So you do need to have a strong vision of how this is going to work, and that starts probably a year and a half to 2 years before it actually gets released. So everything you see here was probably in mid development last year and is just being polished off for this year. Essentially, it's on the cutting room floor, ready to go out. So that's another piece of context to be aware of with this release. This is probably what Tableau were working on most of last year, and of course we've still got more things to come for the rest of this year that hopefully we'll finish off this great year of releases that we hope to see. So yeah, that's been it. That's been a long long one. I just thought I'd talk through that and get you guys up to speed. I'm going to try and include links for everything below. I'm recording this on a Monday, and so I'm hoping I can get this out on a Tuesday, but failing that, I'm really also hoping that Tableau don't release the product before I release this video. So if that happens, then this will have to do as a preview until I get some time to actually record videos for the new one. I'm actually moving, moving property at the moment. So for the next 2 weeks, it's going to be a little bit tricky. I've literally left my studio up. This audio is awful because I haven't got my sound pads up at the moment. So yeah, we'll have to sort of make do with what we have, and I will try and get through new release as much as I can. They did do a pre-release this time, so I do have the software, but I didn't have the guide. So God, we did get a little walkthrough, but there's no guide telling you exactly what works and what doesn't work and what to test and what not to test. So it's like, I have it, but I don't know what to do with it. So yeah, it's just the way it is. We'll have to wait until it's released, and then we can do a proper deep dive. Another thing I'd love to know is, would you be interested in seeing a review of each release? I've thought about this for last year. I thought about doing a release for 2020, all of 2020 combined. And I started doing that, and I realized that's a mammoth task. And when I talk about review, I'm talking about a general review where I talk about from a Tableau user perspective, how the release was, what things it ticked off, what things it didn't take off. But this also means I'm going to have to talk to people about what they were expecting and what they were having challenges with, and whether Tableau really met that challenge. So if you'd be interested in review, let me know in the comments below, especially if you don't use Tableau. If you're just onlooker, as it were, just interested to know what's going on, and you'd love to see a review, you've made it to the end of this video, so you're definitely up for some longer form content. So let me know what you think of something like a half an hour, 45-minute review of Tableau, not necessarily for each release, but maybe each yearly sort of cut point. So at the end of the year, January, February, right before Gartner drops their bomb on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, we release a review of what's going on. Let me know what you think about that. I've been Tim, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Subscribe, like, do all the things that really help out with the channel and the content. Thank you.